Hello and welcome to video number 1000. So for those of you who do know me, awesome, no introductions needed. For others who don't, my name is Stefan and I am a graphic designer. I am a fantasy writer. I'm a substitute teacher, so I do quite a little bit of everything. And for this particular one, it is video number 1000. So I wanted to have a little bit of fun with this, and naturally, I wanted to talk about one of my favorite things, which is writing. So if you are joining us, welcome, and let's get to it. So as the title says, first off, characters. Characters, like I said, are probably the most important part of any fantasy or any book just in general. The characters that we have are the people that they're the things that we follow along the most. They're the things that we relate to the most. They're the things that we're going to care about the most. So if your characters are great, we're going to care about the book. If your characters are terrible, we're probably not going to care about the book as much. Now, I also want to make a clarification. When I say great characters and terrible characters, I'm not talking about their morality. I'm not talking about if they're a good aligned character as opposed to an evil aligned character. Because let's face it, sometimes some of our favorite characters happen to be villains. Villains have been some of the coolest characters, especially like Darth Vader, for example. We love that awesome Dark Lord, like literally Dark Lord, all dressed up in the crazy big black armor. We love characters like Sauron, Saruman, the wizard that was good and then slowly became evil through temptation and through other situations. Those kind of characters are a lot of fun. We really love that great adversary that the protagonist has to fight against. So when I say great and terrible characters, I'm talking about the well-developed, the well-written. I'm talking about the ones that have depth. I'm talking about the ones that you really care about in either a positive or a negative way. I'm not talking about, for example, I'm not talking about flat characters. Now, you might have heard the term flat compared to a three-dimensional character, and just kind of go into that terminology. A three-dimensional character is one that, quote, has depth. So not only do you have what they like on the surface, not only do you have their eye color, hair color, their, whether they smile, whether they're big, whether they're small, but it goes into their character behind the appearance. It goes into their personality, goes into their likes, their dislikes, goes into their family, goes into their behavior, who they like, who they don't like, who they're in love with. Those little details that help flush them out and just make them someone that not only we can relate to, but someone that we can actually like. Now, you'll also hear the term flat character. Flat characters are essentially just those ones that exist only on the page. And so you read and they're just, you've got their description, you have their eye color, hair color, body shape, and then you have a name, and then that's it. That's really all they do. You might have a single distinguishing characteristic of them, but for the most part, flat characters are kind of boring. Now, that being said, flat characters do serve a purpose. They are great secondary characters. They are great if you just need a placeholder character. If you don't need a character that is going to carry on through all the rest of the story, and you need that one single merchant that's going to exist in that one single scene, or you need that one that one ship captain that's going to get them from point A to point B and exists in basically a paragraph. You don't have to go too big into developing them. You don't need to include too much of their backstory. You don't need to include too much of their, family life. You can do that too, but you don't need it. Well, when you have main characters, however, main characters you really do need to develop more, because if they're going to stick around, then if you want your audience to care about them and to want to keep reading them, then they're going to need something to keep, latched onto. So when we start, I was talking about good characters, bad characters, and then hopefully how to fix the bad characters. So good characters when you think about the books that you enjoy, when you think about the movies that you enjoy, when you think about those characters, odds are those are going to be the characters that are the good ones. When you think about stuff like, ooh, what's a good example here? Okay, I'll go with an old tried and true classic. Let's talk Lord of the Rings. Now, there are a lot of really good characters in Lord of the Rings, and I'm just going to go into a few of them. One, for example, take the character of Aragorn. Well, Aragorn, son of Arathorn, he's the character that we first meet. He goes by the name of Strider. He is holding his name in reserve. We don't actually know what his name is for quite a while. That in itself has some backstory to it. Why does this character care that their name is not known? Are they hiding it for some reason? Are they hiding it from someone? It gives something in the back of the mind for the reader to go, okay, this character goes by a nickname. Clearly, something's up with him. Also, his appearance. There's not a lot that really goes on with describing his appearance. It talks about how he's dark, how he's this kind of broody character that sits in the corner. But what makes him unique is you see how he interacts. When you have Frodo and he accidentally gets the ring slipped on him and then he crawls under the table, Strider literally takes it in stride. He literally just goes with the flow. And to him, there's not really a huge surprise about it. He just kind of accepts it. So that by itself, that shows that one, this guy's got a history of magic and kind of magical beings. Two, this guy's seen a lot more stuff, and he obviously is not too concerned with a character that can go invisible. I mean, that just shows the kind of enemies that he has seen already to not be, affected by that. But what it also says, too, is this guy's a really good under pressure. This guy, he really knows how to just take things in stride. And this is what we get from his initial character of just that stuff there. But then, because he recognizes the power that Frodo has, and he's able to discern through all of his lies of, oh, no, you're mistaken. Oh, I don't have anything. And Aragorn's basically like, you're an idiot. And if you don't stop that, you're going to die an idiot. So, yeah, get over here. You're coming with me. And then the other hobbits come. Of course, the other hobbits don't quite trust him, but he's like, no, here's what's going down. This is the situation. You're pretty much in trouble. And yeah, you're not safe anymore. He's very straightforward, very direct, very in your face kind of character. And he's fantastic. He's absolutely fantastic. Well, we learn later on who he is, and we learn a lot more of his backstory, and we learn a lot more of the stuff that's tied in with him, not just his character, but also his race of people. We learn about the Dunedain, we learn about the elves, we learn about the some of the history in the Silmarillion, how basically his ancestor long ago, he decided when actually, it's kind of a cool story of Elros and Elrond. They were two humans that were basically offered the chance of essentially immortality. Elrond chose to become an elf, and Elros chose to remain a human. In kind of recognition of that choice, Elros was granted long life, not the eternal life that the elves have, but a longer life than regular men. And that carried down through his people and through all of his descendants. And then the race of the Dunedain was created. So Aragorn, when he actually starts Lord of the Rings, he's like 87, I think it is. They actually got that part right in the Two Towers movie extended edition. I thought that was really cool. But yeah, Aragorn, he's pretty old. He's been around for a while. And I believe he lives to be over 200, I think 250 when he finally dies. So he's got that long life going on there. And we learn that his people, they were the rangers that were charged with protecting kind of everywhere. And Aragorn and his group of people, they mostly watched over the Shire. They protected the Shire. And this is another interesting thing because the Shirelings, they really didn't offer anything. It was not one of those symbiotic relationships. It was not one of those, help you and you in turn help me. It was, they just wanted to preserve and protect that area essentially for the sake of goodness. And that in itself is a huge character trait that goes on there. And again, that is so much more beyond just his appearance, just his name, just his, initial look. That goes into his character, that goes into who he is. So with that, then you've got some even more interesting characters. Then you look at Frodo, or not Frodo. They look at Bilbo. Bilbo had a birthday party. Bilbo had a huge birthday party. He had 144 people at this birthday party, and this was his 111th. So it's kind of cool like that. Well, some of the characters that we meet there are just their names. And we don't really get much else with them other than this character drank a lot, or this character eating this, or these characters were scared of the fireworks, because, they're not needed to be much more. In those kind of situations, those characters, they existed as placeholders, and that was perfectly fine. We didn't need to have a huge backstory for every 144 partygoers. We didn't. It was not necessary, and so therefore it wasn't included. Does this make them bad characters? And it actually doesn't. This is another thing that I really want to distinguish between good characters and bad characters. Just because a character has a specific role that they fill and doesn't have a bigger role in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't mean that they're a bad character. If they do what they need to at the time that they need to do it, hey, welcome. Cool. If the character does what they need to do at the time that they're doing it and they fill the role that they are needed to fill, then they're a good character. If said character was supposed to carry on through the rest of the story and we never got much more with them, we never saw their personality, we never saw things that they liked, things that they did, and they just somehow were always there, you would always wonder, why is this character actually here? And now comes a interesting thing, because with Star Wars, I'm a huge fan of Star Wars, and I think that it might be time to address some of the classic problems that the sequels have. So first off, if you look at the original Star Wars movies, so episode 4, 5, 6, yes, a little out of order, but it's life. Luke, obviously an essential character. Obviously, he's a big name character and he does stuff. Han, obviously a big character. Chewie, obviously a big character, especially when you look at his backstory. We look at what he and Han all did together. There's a lot of stuff going on. Chewie, even without understanding what he's saying, you get his personality. You get a lot going on with there. And you really see how he and Han, how their interactions are. You really see the way that Chewie genuinely cares about just a lot of the people that he's with. And you get a lot of Chewie's backstory, or a lot of Chewie's character, even though he doesn't really say anything that ordinary people can understand. Leia, again, obviously, she's a pretty major character as far as things go. The droids, R2-D2 has one of the coolest personalities, and all he communicates by is by beeps and whistles. C-3PO, again, huge. Well, then even going on to the later films. So Empire Strikes Back, you've got Lando Calrissian. We just meet him, and he's introduced as this swindler character that Han knows from previous times, and that's his character. He's really just trying to get the best deal in the galaxy, whatever that means. But you see his personality with how he interacts with Vader and how he's actually willing to defy Vader. Not a lot of people do that. It's kind of crazy. So you get some of his character there, and then you see him a little bit later on in the sixth movie, and you see him. He's actually now part of the Rebel Alliance. Well, clearly something happened in there, and there's clearly something that went on. And then, of course, they throw on that awesome one line. Someone must have told him about my maneuver at the Battle of Tanab. Well, again, you got history. You've got this guy who knows what he's doing, and he obviously has some skill. So he's obviously got some character going on with him. And so again, all developed. Wedge Antilles, he's another one that I really like, because even though we know him just as a fighter pilot, we see him first off as Red 2, and then we see him as Rogue 2 in Empire Strikes Back, and then we see him as Rogue Leader in Return of the Jedi. So we see this one character only in a cockpit, really. We see him when he got out and he's celebrating with everyone later on, but really we don't see him anywhere else except for in his cockpit. But even then, we see a progression of a character that started off in a basic role, and then he advanced further, and then he got further. Well, you find out later on in the X-Wing series, whenever you had a squadron, especially in that world, you would have everything broken up into basically squadrons of 12, and then every 4 would be one of the wings. So 1 through 4 would be one group, 5 through 8 would be another group, 9 through 10 would be another group, and then 1, 5, and 9 were the leaders of their respective groups. Well, you generally will put the least experienced pilot with number 1. So whatever the squadron is, that number 2 is generally the least experienced pilot in the whole thing. So here we have this character, Wedge Antilles, who starts off as essentially the least member of Red Squadron. And then he advances in the next one. We see him in Rogue Squadron, and then he's a little bit better. And then in the third one, we see him as the Rogue Leader. So he's already gotten himself promoted through the course of the movies. So we've seen some character development with him. And what's awesome too is that his personality changes a little bit. He starts off kind of that younger-ish character. Look at the size of that thing line that he's got in A New Hope. And then by the end, he's a much more mature pilot. He's a much more direct. He's a much more, I've got a plan. Here's what we're doing. You come in, cover me. We got this. And he's very much a leader character. So we get to see a character development, even though we don't have a lot of time with him. It was absolutely brilliant. Unfortunately, now I have to talk about the sequels, the episodes 7, 8, and 9. And this is where we're going to get into a lot of potential conflict, because there's a lot of, frustration with these sequel movies. And there's actually a lot of frustration with a certain character whose name is Rose. Now, if any of you have seen any of the sequel movies at this time, you'll understand who I'm talking about right now. But for those who don't know, the problem with Rose's character is I don't really know why it exists. Now, I also want to point out, I'm not saying anything bad about the actress that is playing this particular character. My question is, why does this character exist? Because here's one of the things. When you ask what makes a good character or a bad character, you also have to you also have to ask the question of, why does this character exist in the book or the movie or the play or whatever? What is their purpose? And if the purpose is just to be a temporary placeholder, don't give them really much screen time. If the character has a very specific purpose and they have a very important purpose that actually furthers the plot, then, by all means, they have a place. Well, the problem with Rose's character is if you removed the character, and this is an important thing, if you removed the character completely, you would not really change the story at all. And I want you guys to think about that if you've already watched the movie. I want you guys to go back and think about how her character was introduced, how her character was utilized, and basically what her character actually did. Because at the time, she was teamed up with Finn when he was going off and trying to find this Slicer character. Well, again, she didn't really do much. And Finn and BB-8, they could have handled everything by themselves. When they got locked up, again, she didn't really do much. Finn, he already existed at the very beginning as part of one of the main characters that you knew you were going to follow. So he already had an established role in everything. So he could have just done that again. When he finally meets up with the dude that ends up being the Slicer, again, they could have just as easily teamed up with him and then they go off and do the stuff. Yes, she had that necklace that he used, but that could have very easily been changed and very easily been written into a different thing. And again, it's not technically needed. Well, then at the end of the movie, and here's another thing that I find kind of frustrating. Finn, his character was a stormtrooper that realized this is actually a terrible thing and I got to get out. And so he does. He actually goes against his Imperial training, his Imperial kind of conditioning, and actually switches sides, which is huge, and has to try to figure out what he wants to do with all of that. And then at the end of the second movie, there's this really great big thing that's basically a battering ram that's going to try to get in. And he has the idea that he's going to take the ship that he's in, he's going to fly it straight into the center and basically destroy it, essentially Independence Day style. And I think personally, this would have been a fantastic thing for his character. I think it would have been one of the best things for his character because it would actually complete the arc completely of, here I have this guy, I'm fighting against this great big empire that I really hate, and I'm going to just try to save myself and try to get out by myself. Then he finds this resistance, finds something that he really cares about, finds people that he cares about, and that he's actually willing to go through and do this. And if he had been successful, then it would have saved a whole ton of lives. But then, out of nowhere, Rose, somehow she had a ship also, and she flies hers on a direct intercept course, which, let's face it, at the speeds that they were going, that should have killed him and prevents him from flying in, and then makes the line of basically, we don't sacrifice ourselves, and then appears to die as a result. So it's like, I feel like that was really, really undermining his sacrifice and his choice in the matter because, again, it probably would have worked and it probably would have actually brought the thing down. And yeah, plus it would have been amazing for a main character to actually sacrifice himself in the second movie, knowing that there's a third movie coming in. It would have been a surprise. It would have been awesome, but it would have been great for his character and his character arc. And then he would have essentially been a martyr for the cause, for the resistance. He would have been a sacrifice that they would have rallied behind, and there would have been a lot of potential good stuff out of it, especially because then in the third movie, Rose's character does nothing. Literally, her character does absolutely nothing. Her character has absolutely no point. So that's, it's frustrating because she was built up as a really big character that didn't really go anywhere. And I really wanted to see a lot more with that. I really wanted to see a lot more of a purpose to her character. I really wanted to see a lot more depth to her character. I really wanted to see a lot more, just kind of everything with her character. But the problem was, as a character, I would argue that she would actually be considered a bad one. And when you have characters in books, readers are going to pick up on this. Readers are going to care. Readers are going to want to see your characters do stuff. So now we come to the important part. How do we fix bad characters? And the first question is, why is the character bad? If the character is bad because they just don't have any depth, well, the answer is very easy. Give them depth. Give them a personality, give them things that they like, give them things that they enjoy, show them interacting in fun ways, give them a very specific role. And then if they're going to appear later on in the book, keep on giving them a specific role that they have to fulfill. If a character, and here's kind of a thing about this, in the Lord of the Rings, and it's actually kind of funny, you have this character whose name is Fatty Bolger, and his official name is Frederick Bolger, but everyone calls him Fatty because he's so big. Well, he was the fifth Hobbit, and they took him out of the movie completely, and that was very unfortunate because this character, he was part of their group. He was one of their really good friends, and in the Lord of the Rings book, when Frodo learns that he actually does possess the One Ring and that he has to get out, Gandalf actually encourages him, don't just sneak off. Let people know that you're going. Don't do it in a really deceiving way because then that'll create idle talk. Get out, but do it in a good way. And so his logic is, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to move to Crickhollow. Bilbo had been gone already, so his family is basically gone from Hobbiton. And so Frodo, he makes this big to-do about how because Bilbo's gone, he misses his family, so he's going to move back there. He's going to set up a place. He's going to have his own little thing. He wants to be closer to family. And none of the hobbits have any reason to question that. He buys a house with the money that he has. He actually makes a deal of getting his stuff shipped over there. And so when Sam, and Pippin actually start off, Merry, he and Frederick, they actually go off to the home in Crickhollow, and they actually take everything over there. And I think Pippin does too in some parts of it. There's actually a lot of time that Frodo takes to leave, but he does it the right way. So, this character Frederick, he actually is the one who's basically, he's holding down the fort. This is his role. When Frodo, he goes, he knows he's going to be leaving. Sam, he knows he's going with him. Merry and Pippin decide that they're going to go. And Frederick is like, heck no, I'm done. I don't want to go with you guys. I'll stay here. I'll hold down everything and I'll keep tongues from going too far. And that's his job. That's the thing. He does his job and he does his job really, really well. And what's awesome too is that when the Black Riders, when they show up and they know that Frodo should be in Crickhollow, he actually has the knowledge, he has the quick wit, he sneaks away, he actually alerts everyone that the Black Riders have come, so sends up what's called the Horn Call of Buckland, basically raising the Shire at that time. So he's awesome. He does his job, and essentially his role was not to go on the adventure. His role was to basically hold down everything, and then he does it well. We also know a little bit more about him. We know that he really cares about his friends, enough so that he really took the time to actually set things up, make things look actually nice. Tells how he gets a bath ready for him, how he gets a meal set for him. He's getting everything ready, and he's taking care of his friends. He's a good Hobbit, and I really wish that the movies included him. Yes, because of the time frame of the movie, a lot of the stuff would not really be necessary. Like I said, in the book, Bilbo actually goes back to the Lonely Mountain and then comes back to Rivendell. He was planning on going a little bit further, but basically that's where he stopped. In the movie, he didn't have as much time to leave, so basically he got to Rivendell and then that was it. That was the end of his journey. So I understand why they did that, and I also understand taking out him, but other characters like Tom Bombadil, he's a famous, awesome character that helped him get through the old forest. He also, well, actually, this is an arguable one because as lovable and awesome as Tom Bombadil is, there's actually, like, I can understand how the movie took him out. Yes, I love him. Don't get me wrong, I do love him, but I can understand taking him out because it does take away some of the immediacy that the hobbits have for getting out of things on their own. But yeah, he has his own character. He's got a huge history going on with him. There's actually a lot with him that's really, really cool. So yeah, Lord of the Rings, they have a lot of really, really great characters. And I've talked a little bit before about how I wrote various books on how to actually write fantasy series. And truth be told, I don't exactly tell you this is what you're supposed to do. I just ask the questions. And this is how I teach also. Anyone who's had me knows that I don't like to give the answer. I like to ask the question to lead to the answer. I like to pry the answer out of you because I find that when you come up with the idea, it can be so much better. When some of my students, when they would ask questions about how do I develop this part of the story, how do I develop this part of the character, how do I develop this? Well, I just ask them questions, and I just ask, what are your plans for this? What do you think about this? What would happen in this situation? And in my mind, of course, I've got ideas on directions things can go. As soon as someone tells me a plot to their story, I've got like a few different endings in my mind that I could see the sucker going. But then I ask them, okay, here's this character. Why is this character doing this? Okay, you have this character and you say that this character's dad is really important. Well, how long has this happened? How long has this character been as big as he is? Was the character a smaller person at the beginning, and then they grew into this character in order to get them back? Why does this character not enjoy this character? Why does this character not like this thing? Why does this character care, etc., etc., etc.? I don't like to say this is how your book should go. I don't like to say this is what your character should be. What I want is for someone to actually think about and say, okay, well, based on that question, because obviously it's something that someone might care about, this is how my character is going to be. So in my book series, I just ask a whole ton of questions like, where did your character get their name? You know, in your mind, you named your character something for some reason. I don't know what that is, but you did it for a reason. It could be you named them that because you had someone in your life that you really liked that had that name. It could be that you just really liked how it sounded. It could be that this name has ties to your heritage. It has ties to your family's heritage. It has ties to a culture group that you identify with. There could be a lot of reasons. Well, in your story now, why does your character have the name that they do? What was your character named after in the story? What was your character's history with that name in the story? And so, with that, now you're thinking about the history. Now you're thinking about where your character physically came from in the course of the book. I ask about stuff like, what is your character like to do for hobbies? A lot of people don't really think about hobbies as being all that important, but if a character has a hobby, then it means that this is what they do in their free time if they have a choice. Way too many times I think that with characters we tend to want them to just fit that specific role and then be nothing else. We kind of forget that they exist in a story, not just on a page, but they exist in a world that we've now created. And because they exist in the world, they're going to be doing stuff in the world. And I think a lot of times too, we tend to think of characters more as mannequins. You know, if you think about the idea of a mannequin in a store, it's just stationary, it's physically there. And when a person leaves that mannequin, the mannequin's not going anywhere, it's not doing anything more. But in your book, your characters do stuff. So, does your character have any hobbies? Do they have anything that they like to do for fun? Because what's also really really awesome is that these hobbies, they can also develop into some major plot points that you never quite realized before. um, One example of a, let's see, what's a good example of a hobby in my book? Okay, so in my book I have, let's see, well, here's a really classic one. um, I've got one character, and he is interested in basically being a healer. So, not, I say not a doctor, I say a healer because he doesn't have a degree, but he loves to actually look into plants. He loves to study plants, and he actually gets a really cool book from his grandma that has detailed, um, basically pages on different kinds of plants, what they look like, various uses, and all those kind of things. And as part of his training, he's learned to basically memorize and study these particular plants. And then while he's on the ship, when they have their kind of downtime when they're sailing, he sort of acts as a little mentor slash teacher, and he actually coaches people saying, okay, here's this plant. Now, what kind of plant is this one? What are its uses? What's going on? And the whole idea is that because he enjoys studying these kind of things, he's going to then share that knowledge with other people, and he's going to pass on that information to people that wouldn't necessarily think about it. And what's really cool too is that actually becomes a bonding experience between him and another character who's a total brat, but I love it. And it's basically a thing that the two can relate to when they can't relate to anything else. So hobbies can be a weird thing that people can relate to when nothing else is relatable. They could be from two completely different worlds, but both could share, for example, they could share an interest in cooking. And now suddenly you have potentially this rivalry going on between two cooks trying to outdish each other. Yeah, that'd be fun. It'd be a simple thing, but it'd be really fun. So yeah, what hobbies does your character have? And then kind of with that, how did they get their hobbies? I've got characters that love music. I've got characters that love to play music, and that serves them well. One character actually actually takes his hobby of music and uses it to get in with the city folk and finds a major place for that. So what happened originally, he was just a musician by hobby, just by pure fun. And then that turns out to be his occupation when he gets into the city. So his character undergoes a major shift. He discovers that his hobby can now become something awesome. And he discovers that people genuinely like him as a performer. And so that changes his confidence, that changes his personality a little bit. So that's a lot of fun. Another thing, too, that a lot of people don't really think about, but how does your character respond to money? You know, what does money mean to your character? In a modern setting, we think about, more money, more power, more money, more things, more money, more security, more money, big house, more money, better car. But if you really think about it, how much money do you even want? And I think when we think about characters, I think there's this general, let's just give them everything that they could possibly want. But at the same time, not all characters are going to be rich. As crazy as it sounds, not all characters are going to want to have a lot of money. Not all characters are going to want whatever comes with that. They're not going to want the responsibility that comes along with having to manage a lot of stuff. So, what is your character view on money? How does your character view magic? How does your character view the supernatural? What experience does your character have with magic and with the supernatural? Through history, humanity has been fascinated by the stuff that we don't know, the stuff that we don't understand. Through the course of like many stories, many historical stories, you have individuals that are fascinated by either supernatural, so deities, God himself, or magic and other elements that go along with that. There have been many ways that people have depicted magic in stories. There have been many different gods and pantheons that people have used in stories. But in so many, not just fantasy stories, but even in historical documents, people have been fascinated by the supernatural, and some have legit encountered it. So in your books, what have they experienced? It could be something as simple as they've read it and they've been curious about it. They've read about it and they're not curious about it at all. They've read about it and they are terrified of it. They've actually seen it, they've encountered it. And all of this goes into parts of history. Well, it's interesting because as you're going along and you're asking these kind of questions, that's going to create questions. That's going to create more questions, which means more answers, which means more solving and more questions from those. Once you have the established, my character doesn't really need money. Okay, well, why don't they need money? Why do they have this view of money that they do? What happened to encourage that? And that goes into history. That goes into backstory. That goes into, okay, I'm invested in this character. I care about this character, and I care about what's going on with this character. And then, of course, you've got the classics. Where is this character from? Why is this character here? Has this character ever traveled before? This is a great way to open up setting. This is a great way to open up the world in general. If you have a character that, if you think about Lord of the Rings, the famous line from Sam, when I take one more step, this will be the farthest from home I've ever been. Well, at the very beginning, we establish that this character is literally going outside of his comfort zone. This character is literally going further than he ever has before. And he knows that every step beyond that, it's just going to be something new, and it's going to be the road untraveled. And that is a terrifying thought. It makes for some great stories, but at the same time, it also helps you understand just how small this character's world is relative to how big the world actually is. And once you establish that kind of stuff, then it makes you as the author ask the questions. What is out there? What does this world look like? Who is in this world? Why are they in this world? Why are they in this location in this world? And again, the more things that come up, the more questions come up, the more answers you want to come up with, because again, it adds a depth to your story, and it just makes your story that much bigger. So that's one of the easiest things when it comes to creating characters that basically are not flat. Just ask questions about their origins and give them backstory and give them history. However, we also have to address another very important thing, and this is one of the biggest problems, going back to Star Wars, one of the biggest problems with Rey's character. And once again, I am not saying anything against Daisy Ridley. She is an awesome actress. I really enjoy her playing this character. However, the character has some major flaws in that it has no flaws. If you think about the character of Rey, Rey's character essentially can do everything. Rey's character really gets kind of everything handed to her on a silver platter, and it's like she just really can't fail. She starts off, she's living on this backwater planet as a scavenger and stumbles upon this droid. Well, this Also, kind of go along with her character, it's a tricky one because she doesn't really have any rapport with this droid, and she's offered basically more food than she's seen forever in exchange for this particular droid. Again, she has no connection with this sucker, but for some reason decides, no, I'm not going to trade this. Just going to go from there. Doesn't quite make a lot of sense for someone that's struggling basically with food. Therefore, that's implying she's really not un, you know, she's not really that not well off. She's obviously doing okay enough to be able to say, yeah, I can give up literal food on this. It's not a big deal. A struggle that you wouldn't really see a lot of characters have. She has this strange ability to actually understand droid speak. This is something that characters don't have. Even Luke, and this is what's really interesting, even Luke, who was around droids all of his life on the Moisture Farm, he didn't understand R2. And because he didn't understand R2, he needed C3PO to translate. Then in episode 5, when R2 is in basically Luke's X-Wing, then they had a little translator on the screen for him, so he was able to understand him that way. And then by the end of the movie, on episode 6, he's able to understand R2 much better. And this is something that just took time to develop. Well, she never had that. She just somehow always understood him. Another problem, she understood Wookiee. Han Solo, when he first met Chewbacca, did not understand him. He had to learn the language. Rey, somehow, she understands Chewbacca. Doesn't make sense, especially considering that she would not have been exposed to that. Her piloting the Millennium Falcon does not make sense. Not having a background in piloting, she should not be able to actually fly that sucker. So many things about how she used the Force and how it all just came way too naturally and way too quickly without any training. Again, none of that really made sense. It all just was so super easy for her and way too convenient. And there's a lot of things that I would have fixed about her character. But the biggest problem is that, and I'm sure you've heard this term before, she is what is considered a Mary Sue. Now, a Mary Sue is basically a character that has no flaws. They are able to succeed at basically everything that they need whenever they need to. They can hardly ever do any wrong. If there are any problems that come up, it's nothing bad and they can be overcome really, really easily. Basically, they are essentially Superman. Is kind of one of the ultimate Mary Sues. Superman's weakness is technically kryptonite, only because they needed to create a weakness later on. And so they figure, let's just come up with something that's not on Earth and then somehow always appears multiple times. It's kind of crazy like that. But then if a villain comes along that is too strong for Superman, now they have to figure out a way to make Superman stronger so that he can succeed. And then they created the ideas of how the yellow sun gives him this power and a blue sun will give you more power, and flying to the center of the sun will supercharge him like crazy. Whereas you got characters like Batman, who, yes, he's a super rich character. Yes, he is a billionaire that can create all of his own toys, but he is a intelligent individual. And he understands that he is mortal. He understands that he has a whole ton of weaknesses relative to people who are stronger, who are smarter, who are more powerful, and who just possess supernatural abilities beyond him. So he realized really fast that because he cannot overpower them, he has to outsmart them. He was the one that actually came up with figuring out how to find all the weaknesses of the Justice League. He realized that having people like that unchecked would not make sense, and having all these individuals that could potentially go evil, because that happens. We see multiple times where the good guys become evil through some radioactive material, through some potion, through some mind control, whatever. And he realized that there needed to be a contingency plan. Well, there's kind of a awesome joke going on with there. And he was talking about how he, made contingency plans for all of the Justice League. And then Wonder Woman, she is like, yeah, you've got all these contingency plans for us, but you've got nothing for you. What's up with that? And he goes, no, I do have one. It's you guys. He understood his mortality. He understood that if they decided that he was out of control, they'd be able to take him out. And he also understood that if he got out of control, he should be taken out. He had the ultimate understanding that a lot of superheroes don't. And that makes him insane and makes him awesome. So when you've got characters like Batman who understand that they have weaknesses and they struggle to overcome them and struggle to come up with ideas to overcome them, we love that as readers. We love seeing that development. Whereas the characters that have everything thrown at them and they're always successful, it just feels off and it just doesn't quite feel right. So here's my thoughts on fixing Star Wars, if at all possible. So the first character we got to talk about is Rey. Because Rey can do everything, we have to basically take that out. Now, let her be a scavenger. Because she's a scavenger, let her have knowledge of mechanics and mechanical things. Let her have knowledge of ships. That's all fine and dandy. Now, when it comes to the Millennium Falcon, how about you switch those roles? Her familiarity with the mechanics, anyone can basically get behind the gunner position and push buttons and shoot. That works. We saw that Luke. He basically did not have experience with that, but he could sit in a turret and he could shoot at TIE fighters and actually hit them. So that was cool. So switch her and Finn. The thing about Finn is that because he was part of the military, he was part of the Imperial Navy, he would have had experience with ships. He would have had experience with flying. So let him be the pilot. Now it makes his role all that much more important. It makes that role a little bit bigger, and it just makes a little bit of sense. However, we then come to that question of, at the very beginning, Finn needing a pilot. If Finn was part of the Imperial Navy, but he only flew transport ships, it would make sense that he would not be able to fly a fighter pilot or a fighter ship. So having a character like Poe who understood fighters would make a lot of sense. He wouldn't have necessarily flown a TIE fighter, but he probably would have studied TIE fighters, because if you're going to engage with TIE fighters, you want to understand the ship. So let Finn be familiar with the cargo ships and transport ships. Perfect. Simple. Now, then you also had the character of, then you had the situation where Chewie, he got hurt, and so he couldn't be the co-pilot. Now, Finn will come in. Finn will take that co-pilot role. He and Han could develop a cool rapport, and life would be good. It would give Finn a little bit more of an immediacy. Now, Rey, you might be thinking, what about Rey? Why aren't we including Rey in all of this kind of stuff? Well, what if Rey still had the Force power, she still had her natural aptitude, but what if it just actually took time to develop and took time to actually come out? And what if she actually failed with some of her stuff? What if she didn't just succeed immediately with basically all the stuff that actually ended up happening? Let her fail. In the X-Wing series, there's a really cool character called Corran Horn. He discovers that he is Force sensitive, and he tries using the Force, and he sucks. He's terrible at it, and it's hilarious to watch, because it's like, you always think the characters that are Force sensitive, they should suddenly be able to do stuff, and then he just can't, and he's terrible at it. But the things that he is good at, the the piloting, he finds that he's able to do that a little bit better, and he's able to kind of get in touch with that side even more and become an even better pilot. So we see how his force abilities develop. Whereas with Rey, I really feel like she just tried stuff without even having any kind of backing behind it. So then you have her coming in, and she's with she's in the Falcon. Finn is establishing himself with Han, and they're building a rapport. Well, I could see Rey at this time acting more as a kind of field medic healer role. I see her personality being the strong enough one that she would actually kind of talk back to Chewie and tell him to stop being so stubborn. And then I see with that a parallel between her and Leia. And you saw how, like, Leia was very kind of in Chewie's face a lot, not afraid to basically get up, in there and actually throw some insults. And I could see Rey in that moment that Chewie was hurt be more of a Leia sort of figure, and then have Chewie recognize that and kind of bond over that, and then sort of develop a little sister rapport kind of thing. Kind of with that too, I would then see when she does actually end up meeting Leia later on, because of having Chewie seeing Rey as a little sister, and then seeing Leia as a sister. I could see that making that bond just that little more stronger. Because again, in the end of The Force Awakens, after Han's dead, Leia and Rey, they have their bonding moment. Well, never really quite made sense, but if you had that established, that Chewie sees both of them as his little sisters, now suddenly that would work a little bit better. Then you have that moment in the cantina where Rey touches the lightsaber, and suddenly gets that crazy vision, and now suddenly everything is kind of open to her in a whole new sort of way. And now she discovers, oh shoot, there's a much bigger world out there, and this is kind of absolutely terrifying. Well, she also wouldn't have necessarily studied any force techniques, so I don't see her even trying stuff like at the end with Kylo Ren. I don't see her actually using the Force to grab the lightsaber. I don't see her having a knowledge of any kind of mind trick manipulation. Again, in canon, they've established that telekinesis and Jedi mind tricks are actually two of the more difficult parts of Jedi, and having her just suddenly get that, again, it doesn't make sense without training. Having her develop some for other natural abilities, though, that would make sense. They've had some characters in the book series that they have a natural aptitude with mechanics, but extends even beyond that to have more of a sixth sense about how mechanics work, and a general understanding of how the mechanics are actually used and ways to fix things. The character of Jaina Solo basically had force mechanic ability, and so that would have been a really cool nod. Also, they've established that the expanded universe is not the real universe, so Jaina Solo's character will probably never see the light of day. Jacen Solo will probably never see the light of day. Anakin Solo, etc. Well, I could see Rey as being a replacement Jaina. I could see them taking her character and making her more Jaina-like, and I think that would have done a lot for just the audience in general, and I think it would have made a lot of people maybe not as angry about getting rid of the expanded universe. Kind of on that note, it would have been cool to see Ben again, and this is another big problem that I have. Why in the world did they name Kylo Ren's character Ben Solo? Ben has no meaning to Leia, and and Han at all. Yeah, Ben was Obi-Wan Kenobi. So in the book series, Luke names his son Ben Skywalker, and that makes sense because Obi-Wan Kenobi, he was Ben Kenobi to him. So that name has meaning to him. But with Leia, that name didn't really have meaning at all. She never met Obi-Wan. He was always Obi-Wan to her, never Ben. And Obi-Wan was just a crazy old man, according to Han Solo. So I don't see why he would say, let's name our kid Ben. It just, again, does not make sense. So there are a lot of things that I would have changed, namely making her less powerful in the very beginning. Let her become powerful in the end. Let her go through training. Let her go through, trials, tribulations, all that kind of stuff. But let us see her progress rather than just because there's the Force, it's this. Because as Han Solo put it best, that's not how the Force works. And I think that in a lot of ways that really sums up a lot of things about her character. So, in summary, good characters, you know them because you care about them, you care about what happens to them, you care about what they're going through. Bad characters, you don't really care about them because you don't really know enough about their personality, or because they just can't fail and it becomes boring like that. So give your characters backstory, give your characters flaws, and you'll find that it'll make your stories a much, much better. And you're also going to find that it's going to open up your stories to a lot of different directions and give you, hopefully, a lot more fun things to write about. So, best of luck. I wish you all the luck in the world, as Bombur said it in The Hobbit. And yeah, lastly, like I said, I've got my books out there. I've got my 4-book series. First book is about the story as a whole, helps you develop your main characters, your setting, your antagonists, and also got my map making tutorial to create your world. Book 2 focuses on characters. Book 3 focuses on setting. And book 4 focuses on antagonists completely. So if you're looking to develop those things, I highly encourage you to check those out. I'll include the links below. I've got, this is actually really exciting. I finally got my first reviews on those today, or just the other day. All of them were 5 stars, so I'm very, very happy about that. So they're rated, they're ranked. It's awesome. But lastly, I've got Firebrand, and I've got that book out there. I've got book 2 is actually almost done. I've been having a lot of fun with getting a lot of those character interactions developed and a lot of those just little dialogue bits just to make the characters a little bit more, just to create, just to develop personalities a little bit more. Because that's the thing. I get the outline, I get the rough draft, I get the skeleton, then I fill it in, I put the muscle on the bones. Well, then you put the skin on. The skin's just the outer stuff. That's, the attractive stuff. So that to me is putting in stuff like the little dialogue bit that helps bring out the personality. It includes putting in some of the colors, putting in some of the designs of things, some of the outfits, food, little details like that. So right now I'm putting in those extra bits. The story has the plot, it's got the characters, it's got everything, but now I'm making it just as awesome as possible. So I'll have the link down there for that. And yeah, thank you. This is, like I said, this is my 1000th video. Been going now for about a little bit more than 6 months, have over 1.6 million views, over 2,400 subscribers, and I just wanted to thank all of you guys for making this. I know this is a little bit long, so if you stuck around to the end, awesome, but just want to say thank you guys so much, and I look forward to the next 6 months, the next year, and the next however long I can create. Oh, hello. Man, I am so sorry you just caught the end of this, but hello and welcome. So, on that note, I hope you have a pleasant night or whatever time you're watching this. Take care and goodbye.